everyone. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm Alexie, if we haven't met yet. I'm a customer marketing consultant, and Mary asked if somebody was willing to step into the world of references to host this conversation, and I put my hand up. I don't know if that's good or bad. Sales references are a wild ride. So I did put a question in the CMA Weekly just to see what everyone wanted to talk about this week. And it sounds like actually getting in the door with sales is maybe the place to start for today. But if there's anything else that we want to talk about, feel free to jump in. I mean, we can talk about the whole thing. There's also another call scheduled for August where we can, shoot the breeze and come up with topics off the cuff, or have sort of more of a structured conversation. But we might as well get started with getting in the door with sales. I know that Kaylee and Mara and somebody else mentioned that they were having issues. Meg mentioned that they were having issues just starting the conversation with their sales organization. I think it's really common. I don't know, Kaylee, do you maybe want to talk a little bit about the challenge you're having?
Yeah, I can. Hi, everybody. My name is Kaylee. I'm a customer advocacy manager at QuickBase, and I've previously run reference programs, customer advocacy programs at Jamf and Cisco, and Lyra Health, the mental health care company. So we launched our customer advocacy kind of workflow with Influitive for references in May, and had some trainings. I think a big pain point we're running into for me specifically is that we're not getting people following, the process that we want. So they're really used to doing things their way because it's what works for sales, and sales work fast. And that's like something I'm super familiar with. But I think that a hard thing to see is when I know that there are people who are inadvertently, I say going around our backs, but I'm certain not personal, but it's people who are going around to different folks and not kind of doing the reporting and, keeping track of how many times we're using people and who they're using. And ultimately, those are great voices that we want to get into our customer advocacy program. We want to get those people rewarded. We want to also be able to track the deals that are being done with references, ideally references that we help supply, but also just knowing the full landscape of references that are happening. So, yeah, so I think, a kind of pain point we're right now having is we have this new system, we have this new workflow, we've done some enablement, we've met with new, sales leaders, we have e-learning courses for everybody that joins the sales program that's new, and that's something I got set up with some people who are really actively engaged and interested in the process, which I'm really lucky to have in our organization. But yeah, just the residual kind of people who have been around a lot longer than I have, and people who are really still doing their own workflows and keeping track of who they use on their own computers. And how do we get those people, not the early adopters? How do we get the people who are the last people to adopt and really engage them, and within the context of busy sales seasons? And yeah,
Black market.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate to different parts of that. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. And I heard some other folks saying, the enablement part and getting folks to follow tracks is tricky. So
Yeah. Meg, are you having similar issues engaging the sellers?
Yeah, we actually are like pre-engaging the sellers. We're in the process of deciding like what we want to use as our like reference, like advocate management tool. And I'm just going back and forth on like how much I feel like based on I'm pretty new. I'm Tynes's first customer marketing manager. It's been like the Wild West in terms of like everyone just going like completely nuts, contacting users for stuff. And the volume is like extremely high. So I've been on board for 2 months and am already managing 40 different requests. So people are kind of getting on board with like looping me in to these conversations. Like that's taken like a little bit of time, but now I'm like really reliably being like looped in on just about every conversation that people are having, like talking about asking customer for stuff. So like that was a huge win, like really unexpected that people would get on board given the way things were going. But then I can't manually handle all these asks. Like it's taking half my day and I do 17 other things. And so we need something in place. And I'm not sure if it makes sense to just have something completely outside of Salesforce. That's like flowing data to and from Salesforce. That's just like my little domain versus like, can I get sales on board with like submitting requests through Salesforce, using content through Salesforce? Can I get CS to update advocate profiles? Like, is that all going to happen? Or is it just going to be a different kind of work for me? Or I'm chasing all these different group downs to do different things. So we really need to just like decide, like, do we think people will actually follow it? Is there a chance? And if there is a chance, like, how do we get them to do it? Like, obviously, like top down, like sales leadership telling them they have to, sales enablement, like training people, but like, will that work?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, shoot. I feel that pain. And the conversations with like other customer marketers. I know Christy's here who spends a lot of her day solving for references as well. So I think we're not alone. Maura, what were your you said you were also having issues with the like engaging sales?
Yeah, so we use Influitive still as well, and had just set up the Salesforce reference functionality. So that was in Q1. We got that all squared away, documented the whole process, whatever, was basically ready to start enabling, and then kind of so our advocacy program and everything is run out of customer success. And usually our leaders are pretty on board with everything, but I think they're nervous to get more involved with sales because kind of what I heard back from them was, well, like when you're dealing with people's deals and with people's money, like there can be, you have to know that you're going to deliver. I'm like, okay, but we can't know that we're going to deliver until we like try. So we're all ready to start doing enablement, and then we're kind of told, okay, pump the brakes. We're going to do like a pilot team. And then that was like in February. And of course now it's July and we've not heard anything back about that. So now we're kind of back to square one where we're like, okay, can we do these things called training Tuesdays for sales, which is like an enablement tool for them. Can we go to one of these training Tuesdays and just ask for volunteers? So instead of rolling it out to everybody, can we ask for a couple of people who might be interested? Because we have like a good almost 50 hand raisers who are ready to go, but nobody, that's the other thing. There's not a process in place already. This would be the first time there's any kind of process other than like ad hoc people, back pocket references that people already have. So I think they've never seen a process like this work before or just at all. So we're kind of completely starting from scratch, and I just don't know how to get them interested and on board enough to yeah, just in general.
Yeah, I hear that. Okay, so I mean, I'll start with like what I think is the common thread between all three of the sort of stories here, and then maybe we can like open the floor to others who feel like they've got successful solves for some of these pain points. Start there. Oh, and then Emily's added RFPs and customer names. Oh yeah, that's a I hate RFPs because sellers think that they need customer references for that, where the vast majority of companies, when we're talking about large enterprises, are never, ever, ever putting any customer information, including name drop, in an RFP. They say that that comes later in the sales cycle. So that is my like forever pushback on that. The like one sort of easy solve if you get pushback from saying like, no, we're not putting customer information there, is to say that you use the same standard name drop for customers, but that those customers, let's say you have 3 of them where you just drop their name, but those customers are not available for references. If they want to reference further down the line, they can use a different, you'll go through the process, use different reference. My number one favorite thing to do when trying to like get into a sales organization is start by giving something instead of asking for something. And I think when we think through the sales reference process, we often are in the situation that the three of you are in where you're asking sales like to be let in on their process and also to help you put their process within your system. What I like to do instead is actually ask them, well, what are the pain points that you're experiencing when trying to close a deal? So is it your time to actually find and source and deliver a reference? Is it that you feel like you don't have the material you need, so you're defaulting to a reference, which is what I see all the time, especially if your organization has young sellers, young meaning either like age-wise or young in their like sales career, because to me, an organization that is using references on every single deal is an organization that does not have a well-trained sales team or a team that's well enabled to actually sell. The reference should be, in my opinion, a formality at the end of your deal negotiation. It should be the confirmation that everything your seller has said is accurate and true. It should not be happening at like stage 2, so that your customer, your reference, is the one actually selling the product to the prospect. So where I usually like to start is with asking those questions, like what are the pain points, and then coming up with quick solves. So often what I see is there's like not a lot of easily available customer proof. So they're defaulting to a reference. That might be like a quick slide. That might be a slide of other customer logos using that same product or solution. Or one that I think is pretty common is like customers in the same vertical. So like who are your customers that are in the same vertical as the prospect that are using your product or solution? Those tools, which are truly, they take no time for a customer marketer to pull together. If you just give them to the sales organization and say, hey, like I heard you were having some issues, this is where we're starting, but like we're building a bigger thing, that has helped me a lot. And then I think it was Meg, you mentioned that you've had some conversations with sellers that have been good. I know Kaylee, you said like some people are on board. What I would do with those folks is definitely ask them if they can help you sort of pilot the project. And then the proof of your project actually working or your sales process actually working is on you to prove. So you should show things like time to close a reference and then time to close the deal after the reference is delivered, and then compare those against other folks in the sales organization. That's sort of like the sort of quick hits ones that I would start with. But is there anyone else in this large room, I've got a scroller now, who might want to pipe up with some suggestions for how to break into sales or other sort of like complications of why they're having issues breaking into sales?
Am I good to go?
Yeah, go Tiffany.
So, a lot of it is, yeah, it's, obviously depending if you're with a startup and there's not a lot of case studies, right, or quotes, and a lot of times people don't know where to find everything. So the way I do is I work closely with product marketing, and every time I've implemented a few things. One is, case studies, and there's a doc where everybody can search based on vertical, size of company, types of organization, professional services, marketing agencies, and so forth. And then put that all in the sales portal or whatever repository that you use, and make sure whenever we launch a case study, like 5 things need to happen, right? Obviously, we get it approved. There's a PDF. We send it to the client. We do social around it. We launch it internally. So I would attach it, or before we used to use HubSpot and people can click on it and get it there. And then everything. And then I created something called the case study success, a case study slide deck. So then every time we launch, there's a one slide that's included, and we keep adding to it. So then if there's 100 case studies, should be 100 slides that anytime sales can just take, dump it into their prospect deck that they're demoing when they're prospecting, and it's all there and it's easy. There's a quote, there's a metric, there's obviously some basic bullets on vertical, size of company, all that type of thing. So that helps. And we call it like reference deflection, because we want to make sure that they're leveraging all the sales enablement assets that are available first. And a lot of it is, yeah, people don't know, they're not aware, but show them how to fish, right? Maybe meet with them monthly or bi-weekly for 5 minutes. Customer advocacy is going to talk about this, because there might be new reps that aren't aware. So try to, obviously exhaust all that first before you have to get a reference. And if they don't follow process, then they're not going to get a reference. That's kind of, so at the beginning, it was very manual. And at the end, there was a form that we created in Salesforce where you have to do these things, and it'll notify ops and then customer marketing or customer advocacy. And then we have time to work on it. But as we all know, references usually come at the last day of the month, the 30th, 31st. Everybody needs it. And you have those select few people where I could just text and I can get them on a reference call. But it takes time to build. And so I'm not sure where the maturity level is of your programs, of the people that we're talking. So happy to answer any other questions. Hopefully that was helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely not boiling the ocean. You're not going to go from today where no one is using the process to tomorrow where like everyone is using the process. But definitely, like Tiffany said, adding information into the sales portal or whatever tool might be available for sales is really helpful. Is there anyone else who wanted to jump in? No. Okay. So Emily has just added into the chat asking about tools they use to attach evidence to the opportunity. So a lot of the vendors that are on the market for like customer marketing databases would provide that for you. So I think even most of the ones that are outside of Salesforce have a plugin that attaches the evidence right onto the opportunity. I haven't seen anything built by a Salesforce ops team that's like custom built with the customer evidence. So I'm not sure if there is an opportunity for a custom built option there. Generally speaking, I don't think it matters what tool you're using. I don't think it matters if you're in spreadsheets, out of spreadsheets, in a reference management tool or not, to have a successful reference program. I think I've seen it successful every way, but I don't know about providing that customer evidence right on the opportunity outside of one of those tools. I don't know if there's something the three spokespeople for today's call want to like dig deeper into. I know we sort of like talked about it very broadly, but I think we could get deeper into some of the issues of the actual enablement and getting in front of the team. So is there something in particular that you want to sort of go back to?
I'm curious if anyone has done like a pilot team or kind of beta team of people internally who have like, was that, if you've done that, was that successful for you, or would you recommend just like hitting everybody right away? Because I think we'll have the opportunity to go either way. We could introduce it to everybody, or we could kind of do the more couple of volunteers approach and see how that goes before kind of opening the gates to everybody.
I can speak to that. I've done at different places pilot programs and found them to be very successful. So I think that it allows you to form kind of closer connections with certain sellers at different levels, and you also can talk with sales leadership about who they'd recommend. So you kind of find your advocates and early adopters and spokespeople within sales or CS, kind of whatever department you're working with. And I think keeping it both in terms of like a listening session about like pain points, getting that feedback that we talked about, which is so critical, kind of doing that listening session with different verticals, and then also the different types of deals you're doing. So some of those like really recognizable big brands, we know people that are working on those teams versus kind of like the more commercial or small, medium businesses. And then I think, once you kind of identified the pain points and getting that feedback, kind of making sure you can close that feedback loop with them about like how you were able to implement some of that into the process that you're doing. So, that might be being alerted about those different big deals coming up earlier, to be able to work more closely with like those finding executive sponsors, maybe finding different ways that, you know, you can work with their team to have more heads up so you can get some of your big, like customer advisory board members or kind of those big people to sign up earlier. I also think that pilot programs allow you to be able to get the sense of like how people are interacting with the actual platform. So whether that's in Salesforce or if you've got forms that you have people fill out, whether that's Asana or QuickBase or Google Forms, whatever you're using, getting the feedback about like, this is too long, or like this question might seem relevant to you guys, isn't relevant to me. And then really kind of trying to be able to implement that. And then also you can get quotes from those people. You can like share with their team leaders that they did a great job, give your feedback to them for like their own professional development within the company. You can try to do some rewarding if you have the budget to be able to even just send like a handwritten thank you note to them if you can't, because you could probably afford like a stamp, but also being able to send like a thank you for being like a supporter of our advocacy program or our references, like we think you're swell, here's a little something, so they can feel like they have even more. I mean, it's just turning them into advocates, right? It's what we do all the time. So just doing that internally. And then I found that when I've done enablement currently at QuickBase, being able to include some quotes from sellers that were in our pilot program or who had really good experiences early on, and being able to share those quotes more broadly with like on a slide for the enablement in the e-learning courses. So hopefully that's helpful. Some tidbits.
Like a reference for the reference program.
Yeah. And having people at different levels. So like no one might care about, except for me, about like what someone who's in their first 6 months of a small medium business, you know, account seller might have experience with that. But like if you get some of the people kind of at mid managerial levels, if you can find an executive sponsor for your program, like getting quotes from them about what it means to follow this process. And you might not find that, but if you have some quotes from people, you can ask them to even speak during like an all sales enablement. If you have that, you can say like, hey, you know, Morgan, can you come off mute and just mute and share your experience about what it was like submitting a reference? And people will be like, oh, it was really easy. Kaylee was great to work with, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, thank you. It was really easy. So, yeah.
I've
That's
used quotes from sales leadership or like regional VPs in the decks that we've created to sort of introduce the program, and found that to be really helpful. And then once you have a reference that you've closed in their region and you are the one who led that process, to make sure that you sort of like update the quote or update that sentiment, and knowing that you've got a leader who impacts the designation of particular deals or opportunities to those teams that's bought into the process, sales tends to want to like snuggle up to that. Another thing that I've seen really successful that I think actually, Allison is here, it might have been a suggestion from one of our Reference Edge program admins, but I think it's brilliant. If you have a customer conference or any other kind of event that your customers might want to attend, and that your sales team is using to sort of like sweeten the deal on closed deals or with their customers who are in renewals, for example, you only distribute event tickets to not only sales people who use your process, but only to your advocates. And so if they're not using your process and they have somebody on in their little black book that is doing references on the side just for them, but is not in the greater pool, so sorry, we didn't track that activity, so we can't reward that activity. And having your sort of like marketing VP or, you know, CMO actually uphold that and not go around you has been hugely successful. So if there's a
Good idea.
sort of like, sorry.
Oh, I said that's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea. And it's worked so well because at least for this particular client, they use their sales organization uses tickets as a thank you all the time. And so having ownership, you taking ownership of that process and not just distributing them. Same actually with like speaking opportunities. If you have an opportunity to put a customer in front of an audience and your account team comes to you and says, hey, this includes CSMs, because CSMs can also be really difficult to get integrated into your program. They say to you, hey, this customer has done so much for us, they really want to be on stage. And you say, that's great. I'd love to figure out a way to do that, but I can't reward them for the tasks that they've sort of done outside of the program. Let's get them into the program and get them rewarded for the work they've done.
Yeah, echoing Alexia, yeah, having an internal champion is key and very important, right? So then it's a win-win for everyone. And then of course, acknowledging whether it's the CSM or the rep who closed the deal. Like when I launch a case study, I try to thank all the people like the AE who closed the deal, and or the CSM that was obviously taking good care of the customer because they're happy, they're an advocate, right? So that helps too, and it kind of creates this fun kind of competitiveness and giving them like, maybe a $20 gift card to the CSM just as a, hey, thank you. And so people are like, hey, I want that. They want to be acknowledged for their hard work and their good work, right? Of having customers that are advocates and participate in these types of things. So it's a win-win for everybody. It creates synergy and stickiness within the teams, right? And so I think that's always a plus.
And sometimes like you just have to be a bit firm. Like sometimes you have to hold strong to what your program is and demonstrate why the program works. But the issue is, and like the answer to every question in customer marketing is always it depends in my experience. So you can hold firm, but then if you have no buy-in from your leadership and you have no belief in you from your leadership, clearly holding firm is not going to continue to benefit you. So coming up with creative ways to benefit everybody and sort of solve for some of these pain points, I think is like the best way forward. I've seen a lot of people be successful, maybe you don't have a robust sales reference program yet, but maybe you have a robust customer content pipeline. So is there a way to like chop up some of the interviews that you've done for your customer stories and put them into an internal only doc or website, or like not publicly customer facing, but something that sales can then send out to their customers that feels a little bit more authentic, that operates as a sales reference, but isn't chewing up your pipeline, which might be non-existent. It's sort of that continued mindset of like, how can I help solve these problems, improve the value of me as an asset to these salespeople? And then eventually I feel like the rest will follow. But I agree that sort of like best practice in general is like getting in front of the sales organization as much as possible, whether that be as a group or at an individual level, even just to reiterate like, hey, I'm here to help and I'd like to hear what's not working for you, or I'd like to hear more about what is working for you and how I can help you with that. Or I understand you have a like robust network of customers that work really hard for us and we'd like to reward them and thank them for their time. Sort of leading with that, let me help you, versus like, can I have your customer's name and contact information? Another thing that we've had good success with one client is starting having a customer awards program and nominating customers on their behalf as a way to sort of like get them into the advocacy pipeline. And sales are really keen to have their customers win awards because it looks good for both the account owner and the customer. So it makes renewals and expansions and all of that much easier. And then once you have that sort of relationship, you have that name, there's somebody at that account that is close, then the customer marketing side of the conversation, you all know how to do that. It's the easier part of pitching the benefits of your program and the benefits of, networking with their peers, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes it's just getting, wresting that black book from the sales, like cold dead hands. Yeah. Is there any other topics that we want to talk about sort of in regard to enablement or getting started with a reference program, or do we want to?
Can I ask a follow-up question, Alexie?
Of course.
I think I've run into trying to get that black book from sellers, and I think that some of them don't seem to think that their customers will care about rewards or getting, accolades or getting like the tracking. They're not as interested. I think they're more interested in protecting who they're using. So I've asked for people who have told me they're using other references and followed up with them, and they just like won't share. So it's I'm curious if people have found success in being able to kind of bridge that gap. I've tried having kind of conversations with them about like, I want to just know like how I can best fit into your process, try to make sure that like if you don't think your customers are interested in being rewarded, what's your best case scenario for getting to work with our team, and also making sure that we're able to kind of track these numbers? I'm just curious if people have had any success with conversations like that are pretty candid and pointed, but also like, if rewards aren't what they think they want, like what do they think they want, or how can we, yeah.
Does anyone want to jump in?
Stephanie says no success.
Honestly, that's also sometimes how I feel. Sometimes I will admit, I think it is easier to like identify the lost cause within your sales organization. Occasionally there's going to be a few of them, and you just sort of move on and hope that the culture of the sales org shifts away from whatever culture that person or those people are promoting, and choose not to be bothered by it, although it is infuriating. With one team that I work with, the person or the people who are like that are the account owners of all of the major brands, like every single major recognizable logo that the company works with. And it's so fun when you're trying to, fighting for your life, trying to find a reference, and you know that they have one and they just won't share. But they will share, not with you, but with, if the salesperson who requested it through you goes direct to them, then they'll share. So sometimes, oh, Laura trades media opportunities. Yeah. Yeah. And product certifications. Yeah, totally. Also, like actually asking the customer base occasionally what they want and getting a sense. So if you have who you presume to be like a peer at a different company, but similar level of the people you think are in the black book. Oh yeah, conference tickets, of course. Attendance passes into your conferences and also into like industry conferences. Sometimes your company might have an allocation or a budget for that sort of stuff. But I don't believe that there is a customer out there who just doesn't want a benefit for the work that they're doing. Some companies can even offer discounts at their actual renewal or expansion level as well. So
We've actually started doing that, and to get people into like a formal, we're calling it like a thought leadership partnership.
yeah.
And it works really well. Like we wait until we have customers who are at an expansion stage and they're, like we know them, they've been using the platform for a while. We know that they tend to be a little bit more advocate-y than others. And so we'll make that offer and be like, this is the discount you can have. Here are our asks of you. This is to take place over the next year. It's been pretty successful.
Yeah.
Right. Agreed. Go ahead.
I've seen a lot of people be super successful with that. The counter, I think, to that is that people within your organization might argue that discounting your services is not worth it, or devalues the product or services that you're selling, or also makes it more transactional for advocacy and less authentic, I guess. I don't
We
know.
have found a way around that with a very careful positioning. A bunch of our product is based on number of runs you do or workflows that you've built. And so we say, because you're so successful, we'll enable you with more of these, given, that you're willing to do this stuff for us. So it's not like a percentage discount. It's like, you guys are killing it. Here are more workflows to kind of kill it even more. And it feels friendlier and less gross. So I think it's helpful if you have a product where you're not being you can have 25% off our services, but we can give you a few little extra add-ons, I think has been what's helpful for us.
Yeah.
Right.
You have to
I agree.
a discount. I love that.
Offering free services, oh yeah, we can automate a report for you, professional services, and they're like, wow, we really like that. And then that can kind of get them to click on other things that you might be able to sell, right? For free. We can run an automated report for you. Are you doing this really well? We can do this for you if you help us out on a call or what have you. And yeah, just offering up free, whether it's an hour of PS or creating a report for them that that they need and they weren't aware that they can do that themselves, right? And so so there's opportunities to support and help without having to get into the money piece of it, right? Just offering other services.
Another area that I've seen be very successful as well, especially when we're thinking about you know, that black book with all of the best logos. So you're thinking like the most senior, most, I don't know, attractive references possible, is offering time with your C-suite. So if you have somebody within your organization who is, you know, on board with your advocacy program, and you can say to them, hey, like we have this, you know, subset of customers that we're really having a hard time breaking through with, and we know they'd be great with these opportunities. Would you agree to have like a quick conversation with them? And the cool thing is, usually, I think in the vast majority of organizations, you'll have a different set of personas. So they won't all necessarily be like technical personas. Some of them might be marketing, some of them might be, you know, in the finance, like they might be all across your org. So it's not necessarily you asking your, you know, chief product officer to sit down with 10 customers. It might be, you know, 10 customers sitting down with 5 people in your C-suite or something like that. So the ask is not as huge. And that can also happen at events that everyone was already planning to attend. Like it doesn't have to be a new ad onto the calendar. And I've seen that be quite successful, especially if you have like a very charismatic CEO who really is all about, you know, like getting their name out there and being buddy buddy with customers. It's a good opportunity for like a cheesy LinkedIn post. And you, as a customer marketer, can also offer to help draft that post for them, to sort of hit all the talking points. And then your customer feels like, you know, a little bit love bombed, which can help sometimes. Should we talk about something else? Does anyone else have reference related problems? I mean, I'm sure all 31 of you do. Who wants to volunteer a new frontier? Is anyone evaluating platforms right now?
I am.
Are you?
Yes. Do
Okay.
share. What platforms have you, you know, evaluated, and what do you think so far with what's out there?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I have looked at Slap 5 and Champion as kind of like the more outside of Salesforce options. And then I've been looking at Orca and Reference Edge for the Salesforce native. I was kind of skeptical of like the Salesforce native stuff at first, but I came around and now that's what I'm kind of leaning towards. But it's just a question of getting sales on board with like actually following like clearly defined processes and stuff like that. But for us, it's really important to be able to attribute like revenue to all our efforts. So it's been huge, like a huge thing for me. It's like the easiest way to do it. And having the content in there, like potentially being able to be tracked as affecting revenue, provided people actually follow through with sending content via Salesforce, would be huge, because like our content team doesn't have a way to show ROI. I don't. I do a lot of work finding case studies and people to speak on webinars and that sort of thing. So that would be really nice to have.
A
Do you
tool.
have like an RFP list, sorry, Meg, that you use to when you're evaluating? I'm curious what that is and what your thoughts are so far on whether it's feature functionality, API calls, integration pieces that you think are easy,
I
etc.
started with like in a perfect world wish list. And I feel like the more I learned about platforms, I've worked purely from spreadsheets like my entire career. Like I haven't had any fancy bells or whistles. It's just been like spreadsheet hell. And so as I kind of like started to weigh the pros and cons, like honestly, my ideal world wish list changed a little bit. So I wasn't so much going through and like ticking off what has which, but like have more been like changing the requirements and writing like pros and cons of each. Partially because I think the requirements are dependent on how much buy-in I can get from above on like which path we take and like how likely we determine the sales team to be to get on board. So it's kind of like, there's definitely like plan A and plan B.
The whole problem with inheriting or bringing in a new tool is actually getting the teams to use it, because implementing it on the customer marketers end of things is a really huge fun project.
Can I ask a question? Do you have like a group of folks that you have as a focus group or something looking at the new product that you're trying to pull in?
I'm kind of like the scout, and I'm taking back like the 2 or 3 platforms that I recommend, or whatever we end up on, and pitching those to our head of growth marketing, and my manager, who's the head of field marketing. And I think we'll work from those few recommendations that I give them and decide on which way to go. So it's kind of fun to be like going it alone and doing whatever I want, but it's also like, you have to keep in mind like the people that you're going to pitch it to in 2 months. So yeah, fun and lonely. That's like the customer marketer's lament.
Yes.
The cool thing about having a tool is it makes searching for things so much easier. I mean, I've seen some pretty cool and slick spreadsheets, but nothing beats just being able to sort of like type in a few product filters or a few like industry filters and see all of your customers who, have agreed to do sales references in the education vertical, like that is pretty easy. It saves a lot of time, but one thing I will say is that I support, clients who are sort of like across the board in terms of their implementation status. So some have been implemented but are not fully enabled yet. Some are just starting their implementation. The ones who are implemented but not fully enabled yet still have like an email alias that we support, where people still submit requests to, where you're still like uploading that request manually into whatever system and then sending them back an email saying like, hey, thanks so much. Here's the answer to your question. Also, we have this new process. Here's how you do it. And then you track those people and you realize like, oh, it's been 6 months and I've been sending them the same information and they're still just coming direct to me on this email alias. A tool will not solve every reference issue. A tool will like make some things easier. Reporting your ARR, if that's like, your influence on revenue, it's, tenfold easier when it's all tracked in Salesforce. I'm not as familiar with the influence on revenue reporting in Champion and SOC 5, but I know with both Orca and Reference Edge, it's just a Salesforce report. And when you've got folks within your arsenal, especially Salesforce ops, who are really good with reports, you can kind of slice and dice a lot of different ways to see, your influence on revenue across the board. I haven't personally found those tools to be like exceptionally useful in terms of tracking the impact of content, but that also could just be how the systems are set up that I'm working in. I know some people do some pretty crazy sort of customization and workflows where they can show exactly how many, sales people have clicked into or shared an asset. But also, like, just because they've shared it doesn't mean that that asset really did anything, or that the prospect even opened the file, or, So yeah, it's it's fun to be able to like look at all the different tools and imagine all the different possibilities, but I don't envy the decision making, because the process after the decision is made is also like really challenging.
Yeah. I'm curious if on the content end of things, has anyone looked into like other hacks that are not like a customer marketing specific platform? Because I had our marketing operations team, when we were talking about content attribution, being like, well, like one workaround is that we could add like all of the content to like a HubSpot campaign or a Salesforce campaign and like add a pixel and track that way. It's just like not going to track people who we don't know. And I was like, that's interesting. But And then you would have to just see like who it had touched and probably like do the calculations manually, but presumably only have to do that 4 times a year.
Before I worked at QuickBase, which is where I'm at now, I worked at Cisco and we used QuickBase as like a tracker for customer advocacy assets and stories and speakerships. And I found that it was like the tool that kept on giving, and that's was purely coming from my mindset at the time, not working there now. I mean, now it's like, cool, I get to work for a place that I thought was really cool a couple years ago, but I just found it to be so helpful. But I mean, there is a little learning curve of having to create the process yourself, but I found that with just the flexibility of being able to create databases and workflows and forms and just the ways that it could be tracked across teams was super different, but not targeted as a customer advocacy platform because customers across all verticals use it for different ways. But yeah, that was a way that we were able to track assets, that we were able to track speakerships, and that it was a really great user experience back when I was at Cisco.
We use Smart Sheets to track all of that. So we have everything that we have on our website, you know, all the quotes, all the testimonials, all the case studies are listed in there. And then we can track where they are in the website. We also use Seismic. So if they're in Seismic, but then also for events, speaking events, WebExes, you know, webinars, to track all of that information as well. And that works really well.
I'm curious, yeah, what other tools people have used? Like Alexie, have you used any specific tools managing or helping other people or anybody? I mean, I've used Influitive, so I can answer a lot of questions, but you know, I guess from all the stuff that's happened in the acquisition, I am probably not going to be in Influitive land. So if I end up working somewhere, I will not be, unfortunately, recommending them, since service and everything else, it's so important, right, to have a CS person. So curious who's using what tools for what, and you know, what you like, what you don't like about it. Not endorsing anybody, but just learning from each other, right, on really what. That's the only way we're gonna, right, get better, is actually know, okay, this is good for this in my experience, this is good for that, this is where they don't do well. What are your thoughts? Because everyone has different use cases, right? So
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky to use a lot of the different tools on the market. I concur with Mary. One of the coolest setups that I've seen is actually Airtable's like home baked. So I don't think she's at Airtable anymore, but there's somebody in the CMA Weekly who I believe was at Airtable at the time, and she showed me like what they had built for themselves within Airtable. I also am really keen. The woman at Smart Sheets who does customer marketing is named Michelle. I had the great opportunity to meet her last year at Customer XCon, and was also like, can I see your home baked solution? I think my favorite thing is when people are like drinking their own champagne. So Kaylee, I'm also interested in seeing like what is built, what, you know, what QuickBase builds for themselves. In general, though, I think the vast majority of users, unless you have an organization where you've got a tool like QuickBase, Smart Sheets, Airtable that is used across the organization, you often don't have power users within the organization. So implementing a tool like that can be really difficult. What I've seen be super successful is a collaboration between a customer marketing platform, whether that be in Salesforce or outside of Salesforce, with a sales enablement tool. So often HighSpot, that's what I see most frequently used. And that is actually getting your content in front of sellers and then breadcrumbing them to ask for more about that customer. So really doing a good job of teasing out what that story is with those metrics and the products that they're using, if you have multiple products or services, and really showing the impact, and then having a good sort of like document summary or HighSpot enablement, where then that team comes to you and says, hey, that's who I want to talk to. And you can say, I actually don't have them available, but I do have this customer or whatever. And then they're in your process with you. So I like that sort of like combination. usual advice is to go where the team already is. Don't ask them to do anything beyond where they already are. I mean, even in the instance of Reference Edge, which literally is inside of Salesforce, you realize that sales they actually don't know how to use Salesforce. They don't know what the waffle menu is. They don't know how to search for an app. They do not look at any buttons on the actual opportunity between like the, make quote or whatever and like close one. Like those are the only buttons that they know. Even find references is right beside them. They, they're not finding that button. So it's all about like how you can breadcrumb them to where you need them to be, regardless of what tool you're using. Amber, I have seen, her name's Perry. She works at Ada. She recently implemented Dito. She is using them for references and really likes them. I have not had the chance to use them. What Perry likes, and then I therefore like when she sort of walked me through was, that they surface a lot of like quotes and small scale content from their advocates automatically. So the nomination process from the sales perspective is pretty slick. And then once they're in Dito, everything is kind of managed in a way that is unmanaged, I guess. Like you click a box, basically the customer is then added into a pool that are self-served or delivered when sales request a reference, and then they get to choose from maybe 3 or 4 people, and they might see like a quote next to that person so they can get a sense of like what that reference is going to be. I think that works for a very particular use case. I don't think that it's as great for organizations or customer marketing teams that want to actually manage their references, but I know that there are a lot of people out there who don't want to touch their references at all. They want to just enable sales to self-serve everything, and they want nothing to do with it. So depending on which camp you fall in, I think it could be a great solution. But if you want, I can hook you up with Perry, because she is keen to show off her new solution and it works great for her. And they're doing cool things at Ada with it.
I'd love to see that, Alexie, if you're open.
Yeah.
To introduce.
I'll tag her in the comments of the CMA Weekly where we were talking about this, and I'll let her know that I promoted her solution, and now she's got to take all of these calls.
Alexie, I believe it was Valeria who was at Airtable, and I did a call with her as well, and it was recorded for a group. I can go back and look and see if there's things from it that I can share if anybody's interested in seeing the Airtable setup.
That would be awesome, Marion. Yeah, you're right. It was Valeria. I don't think she's at Airtable anymore, but her setup is really cool.
No, she's not there anymore. They took out customer marketing, and then they just recently started hiring back for it.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah. But yeah, we're really, they waited for that. Go ahead.
That's good. They realize that customer marketing is important. We need to not lay off all of us. We are very valuable.
Okay, so Emily has a question about who works at an organization where they don't want anything to do with sales references. Sienna at Sneak wants nothing to do with sales references. Stephanie just raised her hand. She wants nothing to do with sales references. I think it really depends on who you're selling to, what you're selling, what you think the reference is going to say. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't want to have anything to do with references, but I would have to have something to do with references, just with sales culture. And it's no shade to them, because they just want to like fill their quota and make money. And if they make money, I make money. So like no shade, but I just could not trust them to not try to circumvent at any possible moment for what was convenient versus not thinking about what's best for the customer. That's just, my real concern. That's kind of where I ended my demo with Dito. I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the classic, like, I have a $10,000 deal. I'd like to talk to, the top logo of our company. They need to close this deal for me. And it's like, I in a self-service world, I feel like that could happen. I don't think that's exactly what can happen in Dito's self-service situation. But I mean, I know for some, and maybe Stephanie, you can speak to this as well, because you said you don't want anything to do with references. For some organizations, the like scale of diversity in the type of sales versus the reference pool is so small that it really doesn't matter. You could have your biggest customer talk to your smallest customer. The customer experience from both people in that conversation wouldn't be impacted. Did you want to jump in, Stephanie?
Sure, I'm happy to. So I work at an organization. We have something like 300 products, and so it's just a nightmare to try to understand which contact, right? So a lot of people, when they're talking about the account. I'm talking about the specific contact. So when we talk about Stephanie Canavan, what can she talk about? It doesn't always match up with what the sales price. So it just becomes a nightmare trying to figure out who the right contact is to have that reference, who the right reference is to talk. So that's why. I also don't want anybody else to have it. So I'm in one of those positions where I don't want it, but I don't want anybody else to have it either.
Yeah, you can't let go. I always laugh with Christy, who's on this call, about the sales team. They want somebody who wears like, you know, white sneakers. It, you know, only goes into the office on Tuesdays, works, you know, in the Southern United States.
Yeah.
And that's like who their reference is that they're requesting. And you're like, I don't have that. I don't
Yeah.
even have anyone close to that.
Correct. Yeah. Exactly.
I don't want it.
Exactly.
Okay, I mean, we're nearing the end of our time together. Oh yeah, Kaylee. Yeah, you can't just like create exactly what you want. Yeah, I know. Saying no to, you know, for people who are supposed to hear no all the time, you would presume as a salesperson, saying no to them and them receiving the word no is really not within their realm, in my experience.
Mhm.
So there is another call coming up next month. We can definitely talk about video references next month if you want, Emily. I know Mary mentioned them. I think that kind of all falls into the category of reference deflection that Tiffany was talking about, which I love talking about, but doesn't necessarily solve the issues for how difficult it is to provide actual sales references. I hope you guys can all join again next month. We can have more conversation. I'll gather more topics, and hopefully Kaylee, Meg, and Maura, we can get an update on where you're at, you know, 1 month out. Awesome. Okay, thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Bye all. Thank you.
Bye.